to another edition of Gas. I am Gresh. He is Jason Anik.
You were playing everybody and we're winning the game last night.
The head coach is fighting people on the sidelines.
What do you got for me?
I know you're a part of the Tight Pants Society.
No f***ing play is that a gimme, right?
That's right, baby. It is time for your gas on a Tuesday morning. I am Gresh. He is Jason Anik. And no, Jay is not working with overweight Eminem today. How are you, pal?
I'm great, man. I told you looked younger, before we got on, but that MMA comment threw me out of the gate, man. But it's good to see you live Tuesday, 11 a.m. Gresh and Anik Show, Gas Morning Drive. I think we're going to get into it a little bit today, but I'm excited, brother.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot to get into because the Boston Red Sox finally did something. We had a disgrace of a dunk contest, an absolute disgrace. And the NHL may have I don't know, Jay, like cracked some kind of code for All-Star entertainment. But, folks, in the interest of full disclosure, my man Jason Anik and his brother John, massive Red Sox fans. I think some of the fandom has been sucked out of me a little bit because, quite honestly, well, I know too much about that organization and some of the people, and maybe it has tainted me a little bit. But boy, oh boy, Alex Bregman, Jay, finally lands with the Boston Red Sox. You, Cody, your brother, you guys have all been waiting for this, right? I see your social media interaction. Are you like a puppy with two Peters over Bregman finally landing with the Red Sox?
I was until Rafael Devers killed my entire buzz. It's like I'm trying to find the strength to talk to you about Bregman and to rewind a couple days back to how I felt. So maybe I'll go there first before I talk about Devers. From Alex Bregman's singular standpoint, right? I'm so happy this happened because that's the ballpark in which he belongs to be a home player and hit in, right? And Jared Carabas, who is a friend of his, right? Who I consider an acquaintance, you can be sure was talking to him and pushing for this. So I've been very, very hopeful, but every day that fell off the calendar, it felt less likely to happen. In terms of the structure of the deal, 3 years, $140 million. It's really, $120. It's really 3 1-year contract, whatever it may be. Yep. I don't much care, right? Let's just get to year one. Let's figure it out. It's hard not to have Rafael Devers coming through my brain at this point. But what Bregman does to that lefty heavy lineup, putting him right in the middle there, and a lot of what I was going to say today, though, Rafael Devers got in a little bit of the way of it, right? Because I was going to talk to you about chemistry and playing for one another, and you know how much I think of Alex Cora. So before we get into the Rafael Devers component, I know my brother has lost a little bit of his fandom of the Red Sox in the same way you have, some of it being in this business. But for you, did Bregman signing give you any juice?
If it were a permanent deal, yes. But the fact that they did the whole, this is essentially 3 1-year deals where Bregman can opt out at any point in time. Now, the money, they did overpay. And that's one thing that does need to be recognized here. But it made me feel just okay. Like, Jay, I should have felt really good about that signing and thinking, okay, now you start to look at the lineup and you lengthen it a little bit. If people stay healthy, you might truly have something here. And the John Henry thing, smoking the cigar. We won the deal. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of with you. I was excited at first. Then I heard about the deal. And then this Devers thing where, for folks, if you've been either living under a rock or don't know what we're talking about with Rafael Devers, basically he was asked if he would move off third base, and his answer was a flat no. Now, this is what we get, though, Jay, unfortunately, with this organization, because the only reason Rafi Devers has a long-term contract right now, in my mind, is because they screwed the pooch on bets. Everybody went nuts. There was almost a mutiny from the fan base, and the Red Sox were just like, we got to go sign somebody. And they gave Devers the extremely long-term deal, even before he had proven some things. And one of them was being a team leader, and this is not a display of leadership.
Oh, gosh, there's so many places to go. As I said earlier, I was hoping to come on here and go absolutely nuts about Alex Bregman. I was hoping to see a picture of our number 3 and number 4 hitters together, right? Bregman and Devers, like Manny and Ortiz, right? Like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, right? And I come back to this chemistry thing, right? And playing for one another, right? And I bring up the Boston Celtics because Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, there were a lot of people that tried to divide those two together, and it was never a story. Joe Mazzulla held them together. Ime Udoka held them together. Brad Stevens, those guys were always held together. So for me, I don't love the energy around here. I do blame the Red Sox a little bit for a little bit of a lack of communication for putting Devers in this spot. But I want to talk about Rafael Devers for a sec, because I'm not one of those people that disliked the contract. And my younger brother has always said to me, it's not my money. And how bad is that Devers contract going to look as the years go? I'm not sure it's going to look all that bad, right? As a defender, right? I could give you the stats, and I will, from last year. But there were moments in his early career where I really liked the defensive player that I saw. And from his standpoint, I do wonder what it's like to be 28 years old or whatever it is, and maybe feeling like you like to play the field. He's not that clubhouse leader, right? David Ortiz can fill his time as the designated hitter in the dugout, going down and watching film, but maybe Rafael Devers likes being out on the field. So I also think there's a language barrier there, but ultimately it crushed my buzz.
Well, I also think on the language barrier thing, it's not like there haven't been people in the Red Sox organization for 10 years mentioning to him, hey, maybe you should learn to communicate to the media in English and get to the point to where you can then be viewed as a leader. Because if there was one thing about Big Papi that added to the appeal of David Ortiz, it was kind of his broken English and the way he spoke English. It made you gravitate towards him more because you just knew that was the real person. I don't need someone to go up and be a poet laureate as if they're leaping Lanny Poffo back in the WWF in the 80s. But you got to be able to communicate. And if you're going to be the team leader, you got to be able to communicate with everybody. So there are guys that are going to come in who are not going to be able to communicate with you because they don't speak Spanish.
It's fascinating, right? And Manny Ramirez or Vladimir Guerrero Jr., right? But neither of those can really vocalize in English the way David Ortiz did. My brother John Anik, who works for the UFC, has talked about a lot of these fighters and how they've learned English and how it has endeared them to the fan bases once they learned it. But some of the Devers-Ortiz similarities at the plate, right? And you may laugh at this, right? But I believe Rafael Devers has an incredible eye at the plate. He reminded me, I used to say David Ortiz reminded me a little bit of Barry Bonds at certain times where if he didn't swing at a pitch, it was because it wasn't a strike. I love Devers at the plate. I love his eye. I think there is some sort of intangible leadership there, but I think most of that's really going to be by example. And I'm curious, because you now have Theo Epstein involved here and Alex Cora. Do you think those guys, and maybe it's more on Cora, are going to be able to sort of find a way for this thing to dissolve and we can focus on the excitement that is really a very exciting, you got Crochet and Bueller at the top of the rotation. I mean, can Alex Cora fix this?
Yeah, I think Alex Cora can manage it. I don't think he can fix it, but I think Alex Cora can manage it because he has the ability to get through to these guys. And now really our only hope is to have Cora be the one to get to Devers. And I know that Cody put a bunch of stuff up in our chat. And one of the things he put in there was Cora saying, hey, we got to maintain flexibility all year long. And some people are going to have to, like Bregman's already quoted of being like, yo, put me wherever. I just kind of want to be in the lineup. 40 million will do that to a guy. But nevertheless, and by the way, it should. Devers should be willing to at least move around a little bit. And the fact that he isn't, I think starts to sour some people on him. Now, they got 6 weeks of spring training at least. They got time to be able to turn this around and figure it out. But I think the Devers comments didn't catch people around the Red Sox by surprise, but I think it caught some fans by surprise because you kind of assume, especially in that sport, that there is some position flexibility and you need to be amenable.
It's a great point there, and I do think the fan bases can tend to overreact. But if you look at the NBA and you look at Anthony Edwards, right, coming out and saying, I don't want to be the face of the league, right? That's for Wembanyama or whatever that is. If anyone who didn't hear those comments, Anthony Edwards was interviewed and said, he wants to be the it guy on the floor, but not necessarily trying to be the face of the NBA. And I do believe Bregman's annual value for this one season is higher than Devers. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So and so Devers, is there an ego here that we're seeing that we don't need to see? Because the humility, David Ortiz was the alpha, but there was always humility there. Right. So if you need to ship Rafi up to Toronto, bring back Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and sign him to a long-term deal, perhaps. But for me, Carabas messaging me, well, we're back, we'll be fine. I don't know, Matt. This concerns me far more than it may others because I'm a big chemistry situation clubhouse guy.
Well, I think Carabas had him winning the division last year, and we all knew they'd stink. So, and I know Carabas as well, and he's just a honk. So you can't really go by him all of the time. You can't let him sway you that much. But go ahead.
Well, I just think he's tapped in a way that if he's genuinely not concerned about it, it may lessen my concern because he is connected. Regardless of what you think of him, and I'm a huge fan. But he's super well connected to the manager, the players. So I just have a lot of confidence in Cora to fix this.
Yeah, and that's the guy right now. Alex Cora is really the guy on the spot. And when you look at his ability to connect with his teams, he's really never missed. And that's something that I think we could truly take solace in. And I'm busting Carabas's balls because he's a friend of ours. And, there are a lot of people that are genuinely optimistic about the Red Sox. Jay, what I did last night was turn to the betting market. And I admit I did not expect to see the win total that I did with the Red Sox. But just how important was the Bregman signing? Sox are now plus 2,200 to win the World Series. They're plus 1,000 to win the American League. But, Jay, their win total is 86.5. If you're 81-81, you're 500 over the course of a long season. I mean to tell me they can't be, they can't go 6 up and turn that the other way and get to at least 87 or 88 wins, which, by the way, doesn't guarantee them to get into the postseason. But that could be a juicy ticket if you jump on it right now.
That's the value on the board. You stole my thunder. 86.5 season wins. I do like the over. I mean, look at the arms at the top of the rotation we just mentioned that weren't walking through that door last year. In terms of them to win the AL East or win the American League or win the World Series, to me, those are a little more flyers at this stage. Even to see them in the division at plus 425 makes me happy as a fan because prior to last season, it felt like they had no shot. But I would be lying to you if this Rafael Devers comments, and maybe I'm overreacting as a fan, but I feel like it put a blanket over the whole thing to me. It's almost like I can't get back to the excitement I felt a couple days ago because I want Bregman to feel super welcomed by Devers. And if you can't speak the language, I want big hugs all the time and a chain in the dugout or whatever it may be. The chemistry is so huge for me. And if Devers ain't going to be on board for this, I don't care what those numbers say. Yeah, you maybe can win 87, 88 games, but you ain't going nowhere.
Well, and that's a very fair point, and I think a very fair criticism of Devers and a little bit of the worry. There are two things that give me some, comfort in this, right? Knowing that it could end up turning around. Number one, this happened a week into spring training. Like, we barely got this thing off the ground, so you're now going to have 6 weeks of everybody being down in Florida where some private conversations and maybe getting in the ear. I feel Big Poppy sighting will be at camp soon to maybe have some conversations with some people. And Devers might be one of those guys. And the other thing is that there are veterans here who can't explain to Bregman, oh, that's just Raffy. And I know it sounds a little lazy, and that's very optimistic, but I think it's very real.
And I think that's a great point, and not different from the point you made earlier about the organization probably isn't taking this as seriously. And who knows, maybe the organization said, let's just let this thing play out. Rafi's shoulders were banged up last year. Who knows to what extent he can play? I just didn't like the animosity, even as English as his second language. I just didn't like the look on his face for the kid. And also too, Rafi, it's like, let's get in some shape. You want to get in a little bit of better shape. You may play better in the defense. I know that's a sensitive topic with baseball players, but don't come in with that fat face killing my Bregman buzz.
He's Luka. I hope he's Luka. I hope he's that good in baseball that Luka is in basketball. But to your point, they're skinny fat. Is that fair? That's some people think that is a disrespectful term. One other quick betting note on baseball here before we move on, because I know we got a bunch to get to. Will a 2025 division champ win the World Series? The no is plus 210. So if you think someone outside the division winners, I know everybody's heavy on the Dodgers, right? And that they're going to win it. But say if you think, look at the American League East, for example. There could be 3 teams that would get in again. Does one of those wild card teams just get hot at the right time and end up winning it? So if you're maybe not into the chalk as much, if this Red Sox move has got you horny and thinking, okay, maybe they can go win this thing, that's a sneaky way to get some value on someone that isn't going to be a division winner to win the whole thing.
Yeah, and give you some nice action when that postseason does begin, which is a
Yeah.
long way from now. But overall, I am excited about the Red Sox. I'm excited what they did, and I do believe when Carlos Correa was a free agent a couple years back, or there was some talks, some trades and different things, Red Sox were interested. And a lot of these guys are UFC fans. So my brother got to know Carlos Correa, and John just kept saying to me, Carlos Correa is a championship player. That championship DNA, it can sound like a cliche, but that's what Bregman brings into this clubhouse. He is not, you think he wants to just go 1 year and go somewhere else? No, he wants to hoist a trophy. He wants to be in the postseason like he's been every season, I think, until last. So I think he brings a winning attitude, and I love the connection with Alex Cora. I think we're going to see a lot of great things out of this team. I think they'll get through this little muddy spot here.
All right, let's get to what was another All-Star weekend in the world of sports, and it really left us with a lot of conversation. So Mac McClung has come up from the G League to win the dunk contest for a third year in a row. You can already hear it in my voice where I'm going with it, but Jay, I want to give you the floor without me tainting anyone on, did you consume this product? What do you make of this carnival act coming up from Osceola to win the dunk contest?
The Osceola Magic. No, I didn't consume this product. My mom texted me during the day, hey, just want to let you know the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary is on, but maybe you'll be watching the All-Star game. It's like, Mom, neither. Okay. I didn't ingest any of this because to me, it's become less interesting every single season. This contest, right? And I'm impressed with this kid, right? I went back and watched some footage. This kid in high school was just an absolute animal. Do I love the fact that a G League player is winning the contest for the third straight year? No, I don't, right? And I know you've been talking about this all weekend, but you have different guys coming. John Morant coming out. I'll get in next year, and Giannis wants to get on his heels. Yeah, I'm better than this, though, for me. If you're going to open it up to a guy like McClung, why not bring in some outside guys? There are guys on Instagram that has 50-inch verticals that can do all sorts of this stuff. They could jump over a car, too. So I guess to me, it's a shit show. You're chomping. Go ahead.
Yeah, I need a minute here. So first of all, we have a Hall of Famer in Reggie Miller at one point who says towards the end of the broadcast, thank God for Mac McClung. He saved the dunk contest. That should be the most embarrassing thing NBA players have ever heard. And you mentioned that during the contest, John Morant, it was 10:22 p.m. This thing ended about right after 11, right? It's 10:22 p.m. And John Morant says, oh, Mac making me want to get in the contest next year. And 40 minutes later, freaking Giannis goes, well, if you do it, I'll do it 100, bro. You know what that did? That reminded us of how LeBron James killed this whole thing because he never embraced it. He never did it. And the NBA hurt themselves. In 97, Kobe does it. You know what they did the next year? They got rid of it and went to that stupid skills challenge in the late 90s. Every NBA player should be embarrassed that some carnival act from Osceola, who's a one-trick pony, notice he never dribbled or dunked the ball. Wonder why. Maybe he's got tiny little hands. He can only do the explosion dunks. And the guy gets to work on them all. Like Stephon Castle's going to be somebody in the NBA. Mac McClung's going to be known as the guy who made more money dunking in dunk contests than he did actually making money playing basketball. It's embarrassing for the NBA. It's embarrassing to the NBA superstar. And this is one where I can hold LeBron accountable. If you had just done one or two dunk contests, all these kids that grew up worshiping him would want to do it as well because Braun did it. But the only thing they had to do, Nate Robinson did it, or Dwight Howard did it. Ooh, rub them all up on your nipples, boys. My God, that's what the kids grew up with. And that's why we have this, again, put them in the Shriners car and roll them right out there. Let me tell you what they should do. Here's what they should do for a dunk contest next year. Since we're letting anybody in now, Mac McClung can come up from wherever, right? I want it regionalized like the hot dog eating contest. To get into the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, you have to slam the wieners down your gullet in various regions and win to be able to qualify to go to Coney Island, right? So that's what I want. I want a Northwest, a Southwest, a Middle America, a New England, and a South. Find me 5 people, whether they're honkies or not, who can all go dunk, and there you go. That way the NBA player doesn't have to worry about it, and all we do, it's literally something that you and I could probably stream on this channel if we put it together, but the NBA will go with it because their players are a bunch of peas and won't go dunk.
I love it. Well, the way you laid it out, I think is actually very interesting, but it shouldn't be a National Basketball Association product. I don't remember when it was when the dunk contest did sort of become less interesting and less innovative and less inventive, and people saying sort of, there's no dunks left to do or whatever. I don't know when that happened, but when I went back and watched 2016, right? Jared Gordon, Zach, anyone who hasn't gone back and watched that with Aaron Gordon, Jared Gordon. I got Jared Gordon, UFC fighter, with Aaron Gordon and Zach LaVine. Go back and watch that. Those two guys, right, who have grown, it's 9 years later now. You can be sure those young cats back then can't do any of that stuff right now, but it's the combination of the young legs, and I was blown away. And both of those guys, you can be sure, have been all-stars in the NBA, right? So that matters. I mean, but I'll tell you right now, if any real NBA players were in this thing that I had known about, yeah, that moves the needle for me. Is the three-point contest still the same? Because that was never broken. They still run that the same way?
No, they do. And they actually had guys that were stars like Jalen Brunson, Tyler Hero, people like that. And then it was some dude from the Bulls with a funny name, Jaren Jackson Jr., Stephon Castle, because he's 20 and thinks it's cool. And then, Carnival Pete coming up, taking off his clown outfit, and then going to dunk. All right. Just quickly, the NHL may have cracked the code on figuring out how to make All-Star Weekend interesting. They did the 4NATIONS stuff. And Jay, I know you're not a big hockey guy at all, but in my house on Saturday, there was NASCAR, UFC, and then it was NBA, but my kid goes, hey, this hockey game started with 3 fights. We might want to turn it on. So we flipped it on the TV, and what we ended up seeing was if you like hockey, a fantastic hockey game, but the NHL, forget the game, the way it was put it up. The NHL figured out, Jay, how to get their players to actually care about playing in something like this. You juxtapose it to the NBA All-Star game where they tried to shake it up once again. Guys didn't care. Meanwhile, these guys are dropping gloves because people were booing the anthem. It's great.
It's unbelievable. And you talk about caring, right? My daughter's 11 years old, and we had a parents versus kids game at their last practice. Oh. And man, she wanted to win. My daughter wanted to beat the parents, right? So I said to her, she has a playoff game tonight. I said, hey, all you got to do is play a little bit like you played against me, trying to kill me out there, and good things will happen. But it is fascinating, right? In the USA-Canada stuff, and especially at this political time in our lives. I mean, and you're going to get that matchup twice, right? Thursday night and
at the Garden, bro. Like, oh, by the way, they jacked up parking prices around the Garden for $75 for that, just to let everybody know. They've already been complaining out there. Sorry.
So while, yes, I'm not a hockey guy, you can be sure I'm a Boston Bruins fan. And I saw a reporter ask Brad Marchand if he played for Team Canada, if he thinks he's going to get booed in the Garden. I mean, to ask a guy like that, that's just a fascinating question. And I think for a guy like Brad Marchand, who may end up playing his whole career in Boston, I think he's going to get booed on Team Canada, perhaps.
Oh, I would. Now, it's interesting because you bring up something that a lot of U.S. hockey fans were very offended that in Montreal, whenever the U.S. anthem was played, there was some booing. Now, it's also Montreal. And if there is one place where they're going to hate American hockey in particular, it's very much going to be there. I don't think the U.S. fans will be as classless, but then again, you never know. And look, if some Canadian is going to get all fired up because they boo the anthem, then I would say find a bunch of people to boo the anthem and let's see another fight at the very beginning of this thing and let the Kachuk brothers go out there and kind of wreak havoc. But it's going to be amazing. I rarely say great job NHL, but man, even if it's wrapped in a nationalistic pride, they're out there playing hard. In this championship game, USA -115, Canada -105. Total is 5.5, weighted to the under at -120. The over is +100. I feel like it's too tight to bet, Jay. I would go under on the 5.5 total. I think if anything, you're going to get really good goaltending and really good defense, and then maybe a little burst of goals for a 3-1 victory for the U.S.
I love all of that. I think the under would be the only way I lean. And for Adam Silver and the NBA brass watching this, I mean, I think even when you talk about me not being a hockey guy, I mean, this is going to maybe give me a little momentum into the second part of the regular season in the NHL and even spark some interest there. So I really can't say enough about this. And I think even had you not gotten that Canada-USA game, this was still exciting to me before that even took place. So yeah, kudos to the NHL. And I do think the NBA, it's like less is more. Right? I think a few years ago, I think it was 2020, they went back to that East-West thing. It was just after Kobe had passed, and it was a very competitive game. I think it was a 2-point game, and they played competitively down the stretch. So for me, the NBA, getting back to that old school, I think is really all you got to do. I can understand if the game, the All-Star game itself gets out of hand early, but that All-Star game, I didn't watch much of it, but it seemed like even the players, thanks.
No, total junk. How about if the NBA tries to steal this idea and they maybe can, do USA versus the world. I know they've tried a version of that, but think if you took some of the top European players in the NBA, Doncic, Jokic, Wemby, Giannis, Rudy Gobert, put those guys against the 5 best American players you can roll out there. And now you've at least shaken it up a little bit. And maybe if you're the NBA, you can cobble something together that will end up stealing some eyeballs. I'm very hesitant to mention in the plugs and promos. Of course, you can find Jay on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere at Boston Anik. You can get me everywhere, including YouTube if you're watching us on X or Insta. Follow the YouTube channel at The Real Gresh. That's Gresh. And I have a whirlwind week. Thursday morning, my wife and I are dropping my in-laws off at the airport in Providence, Rhode Island at 5:15. She and I with a dog are then going to drive straight through to Amelia Island, Florida, getting there around midnight.
Wow.
So we're going to do a straight. So Thursday, because Thursday is setup day at my in-laws. They got like the business internet coming, So I got to be there to kind of help out with that. Saturday morning, 7 a.m., we're getting on a plane, coming back home. So Sunday, I am jamming in, ladies and gentlemen, 3 national radio shows in one day on 3 different networks. And I don't know if anyone has ever pulled this off or even tried to. Even my friend Jody McDonald would be like, God damn, kid. So I'm doing 8 to noon on Sirius by myself. Then I'm doing 2 to 6 on Infinity Sports Radio by myself. And then 8 to midnight with someone on ESPN Radio. So I will do from this chair 12 hours in one day on 3 different networks.
I love it.
So I do too, because it's unique and it's different. And, whenever your permanent job goes away, people are like, blah, blah, blah. There's been a lot of people who've been shipped away who are, doing Substacks or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm stacking up the shifts in a day and, they can lick my ass. How's that?
Well, whoever's joining you from 8 to midnight, you can be sure it'll be nice to sort of bounce a question or two off to someone. But you've told me ad nauseum that doing this by yourself is in your comfort zone, which every time I talk about doing radio by myself, it's scary and not that appealing when I think about it.
It was crazy, bro. It was crazy how the dunk contest drove 4 hours of calls for me over the weekend. There were a lot of people who were a lot of people who were willing to blame LeBron when you go back and look at the superstar history of that dunk contest. But speaking of superstars, Jason Anik, the Patriots need one. And I would like to lead us through a little exercise, a T. Higgins related would you rather for the Patriots? Because I think, as you and I have talked about, it's going to be a steep number to get T. Higgins. We're talking somewhere between probably $30 and $32 million a year on average, right? So I just went with 30 as a landing spot. So, Jay, would you rather spend $30 million on T. Higgins or $30 million getting Chris Godwin and Mike Williams?
In that particular question, I would say T. Higgins, without question, because I'm not that interested in Chris Godwin and Mike Williams. Chris Godwin just gives me hesitancy. We could have a conversation, Cooper Kupp versus Chris Godwin. I think that could be a very interesting conversation, but none of them are as a number 1 receiver. But if I'm being honest with you, Gresh, like Higgins, I don't think he's going anywhere, whether it's the franchise this year, next year.
Wow, really?
I don't. I think they are going. I don't think it's all just smoke. I think for them talking about wanting to retain all these guys, maybe Trey Hendrickson's the guy that gets moved on. But I think at least another year, T. Higgins is staying in Cincinnati. I just think that they want enough. He wants to be there. They want him there. His quarterback wants him there. So it's hard for me to get excited about T. Higgins. And I will say, I said this on last week's show, after watching what the Philadelphia Eagles did in the Super Bowl and in the postseason and during the regular season, my interest in T. Higgins, while it remains high, has paled a little bit. I'm much more interested in them building out this roster in the trenches than I am going to. Now, if they want to go get T. Higgins, don't get me wrong. I think that could elevate your roster, but I don't think he wants to go anywhere. So for me, I would pick him over Mike Williams and Chris Godwin.
Wow, interesting, because that's why I think this exercise sort of works, because it sort of makes you realize how far are you willing to go, or if in the event of what you say, Jay, if T. Higgins goes nowhere and stays in Cincinnati, then it's kind of like, all right, well, what are the options? Let me jump to one of the would you rathers then with an offensive lineman in it, right? So would you rather $30 million on T. Higgins or $30 million on Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle from Baltimore, and tight end from New Orleans, Juwan Johnson?
Ronnie Stanley and Juwan Johnson.
Yeah, now isn't that an interesting pivot? Only because I know you think T. Higgins is going nowhere, but I do think even in that question, spending $30 million on a guy that could be your starting left tackle and at worst your number 2 tight end, you think about that upgrade in the offense, and you just bring in a marginally good wide receiver, you would think the tide's going to raise a little bit.
I agree. And given how many holes there are across this whole roster, I guess in my mind, T. Higgins just doesn't solve every problem that there is to be solved. So I think there's a lot he's going to demand. So, I mean, Jamar Chase is probably about to get as big a contract a wide receiver has ever seen. And if if Higgins is not going to be there with him, you can be sure he could demand something pretty close to that. So for me, I think that the team that takes T. Higgins could be suffering in other parts. And so for me at this stage, right, I become less interested in T. Higgins to the Patriots every day.
All right, I have another tackle, running back, wide receiver combo to throw at you. But just in terms of wide receiver choice, right? Say Higgins does get free. $30 million on T. Higgins or $30 million on Steph Diggs and Keenan Allen in a short-term run?
I'm not interested in Stephon Diggs or Keenan Allen at this stage. I've talked a lot about Drake May being 22. Both those guys are, I think, over 30. Yes, Keenan Allen certainly, and I think even Diggs is 30, 31. No, thank you. I will take T. Higgins all day over those two.
Yeah, you know what? That's one where I would probably spend on Higgins. On the first one with Godwin and Williams, man, oh man, if you start to think about how the pieces would kind of fit with those two guys coming in, and then the smaller receivers that you already have, being able to work over the middle of the field, to me, that one is enticing. Here's one, because I really did. I thought the T. Higgins piece of this would be a little more intriguing. So would you rather $30 million on T. Higgins or $30 million on Cam Robinson to play left tackle, Amari Cooper as a depth wide receiver, and a flyer on Nick Chubb?
Cam Robinson, Nick Chubb. I mean, Amari Cooper, I guess just take and hope maybe something happens there as the third piece. But yeah, and I think Nick Chubb has some things to prove. You know, when they took Sony Michel, did Nick Chubb go the pick before him or a couple picks after Sony Michel? It was
after, yeah.
Right? So I would love to see him in a Patriots uniform. So yeah, but I think anytime you give me a high-level lineman, I really believe that is such a huge need for Drake May. I've talked about worrying about the concussion, so protecting him, I think, is paramount. So yeah, any of these sort of would you rather that have a big boy in it, I probably would lean that way. But let me ask you about T. Higgins. Mm-hmm. Do you expect him to be in a Cincinnati Bengals uniform under the franchise tag in 2025?
I kind of do, because it would make sense for them to franchise again. I don't know if there was language put in to where they couldn't do it a second year. A lot of agents will try to get that as almost like the make good for getting a guaranteed. I think it was for Higgins, $26.5 million this year. My gut tells me Cincinnati will figure it out, but here's the hope. If there is a team that would screw it up, it would be Cincinnati. They would be the one who would be penny wise, pound foolish, and end up, losing or at least exposing a guy like Higgins. I think, Jay, if anything, they might franchise tag him. If anything, just to be able to work out a trade with someone. Because even his number on the franchise tag, be around what he would get in free agency. He'd probably end up getting a little bit more in terms of guarantee. So I do think the money does play into it, but I think it's 50-50 on Higgins staying there because Mike Brown is a proven idiot, and they're cheap.
Well, and if you bring it back to the baseball conversation about Rafael Devers, right, and how many of these guys, or even the NBA conversation, Anthony Edwards, what does T. Higgins want to be? Because you will always be the number 2 wide receiver in Cincinnati, regardless of what your pay stub says every 2 weeks, so maybe he does want more there, but I don't get the sense, right? I think he's pretty comfortable. I think he knows how good he is and maybe doesn't necessarily need to make that jump. And I do believe that combination, if you're able to keep Burrow, Higgins, and Chase together, I think got a great chance at some point to find a way to hoist the trophy.
Now, one of the last would you rathers I threw in was T. Higgins or someone else, and I'll just leave the T. Higgins part of it out of it. Would you entertain Davante Adams for a 3rd-round pick? He's due $35 million, but you would be able to sort of reset his contract a little bit. Good citizen, only has 2 years on his deal. Maybe you'd have to give him a 3rd. Is that someone you would entertain to be able to come in right away and be a top-level wide receiver-ish?
Without question. I love everything about that guy, and I think there are going to be certain players that are going to be able to perform better into their 30s, and he may be one of them, whereas I don't think Cooper Kupp is necessarily going to be one of them. So I would be all about that, but it's interesting. Davante Adams, some rumblings that he's looking at the Chargers, right? Joe Burrow. And Ladd McConkey, who the Patriots got out of that slot, right? So if I'm Davante Adams, I see, look at all the attention that this guy, Ladd McConkey, is going to take from these defenses, and I'm going to work my magic on the outside. So I do think for some of these, and maybe that's part of T. Higgins thinking, right, too, where look at all these opportunities with Jamar Chase on the other side. So I think the Patriots are not quite, I think there's a lot of sort of excitement with Drake May, but I don't see a guy like Davante Adams wanting to make that move at this stage of his career. And I absolutely still believe the Patriots are a year away. And maybe that's some of the T. Higgins thing. Let him play Cincinnati one more year and then go get him. But I think this is sort of, gosh, I don't like these terms, retool, rebuild. This is a rebuilding year, if there ever was a building year for this New England Patriots club. So I wouldn't mind them holding off on a crazy splash this year and building toward it maybe next year.
Yeah, I almost feel like I'm warming up to the idea of a veteran who is Adams-like, who might be a little bit older, but does the right things, works hard, has been a decent citizen, all that kind of stuff, good locker room guy. If you looked at Davante Adams and you got him to $25 million this year, but you're only going to have him for a couple of years, then it allows you to go get the next big thing in a couple of seasons if you want to, while trying to develop the guys underneath. And look, as much as we all love Kendrick Bourne, that wide receiver group is really young. You kind of need a stud in there, maybe with a little bit of veteran wisdom who could come in and sort of show them the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Davante Adams is a 1, right? And if we talk about Godwin and Kupp, you don't look at either one of those as a 1. Do you?
No, Godwin would be a really nice upgrade and would be kind of the de facto number 1 here. Yep. But you couldn't use him as just the straight up outside Z wide receiver.
I agree. And I would prefer Godwin, I think, to Kupp at this stage because I trust McVay. And look, that organization has been trying to get rid of Cooper Kupp now for 6-8 months, it feels like. So I trust that. Godwin coming off the injury, I don't know, but I agree, right? That sort of go-to guy to be there. We talked a lot about Kelsey being unable to be that go-to guy. And we talked about that. Gosh, I know we do this show weekly, but man, all the stuff that came out about Kelsey after we talked about on this show, him being disinterested without some of those clips. But I do believe that Godwin could be that sort of constant guy to go to sort of get open and be a good 3rd down target, etc. But ultimately, I want that big splash. And Cody puts in the chat, right? Hunter could be walking through that door potentially too. So whoever else you bring in addition to him, that could be interesting.
Yeah, and the Travis Hunter thing, boy, you put Christian Gonzalez and Travis Hunter as your starting corners, and let's say you end up signing Chris Godwin, Ronnie Stanley, maybe you throw a tight end in there. You take a short-term flyer contract on Nick Chubb, who's been dinged up the last couple of years. And it becomes one of those deals, Jay, where if all of those guys hit, then you maybe jump to an 11-win team. But if not, and they're just kind of themselves, it gets you back to par.
I tell you what, Christian Gonzalez and some of the media he's done, give me all of it. He's become, I see him sort of becoming a little bit more. He is. And you see that vocal leader coming out. And I think that second team All-Pro selection has sort of opened up Pandora's box a little bit with his sort of willingness to be a vocal leader. Every time someone wants to talk about Drake May on the offense, he's like, well, I'm leading this defense. I can't get enough of this kid. I think there are a lot of people around the league. Certainly him being elected second team All-Pro tells you everything you need to know. He was banged up his rookie year, but a lot of people don't know quite how good this kid is.
And I know that the number one pick market is kind of fluctuating all over the place. I know we mentioned Travis Hunter. By the way, the only guy who was a Patriot that was on the all Belichick team was Christian Gonzalez. He had to, and Bill, first of all, that's a good evaluation from Bill. Like if Madden did it, we would be like, oh yeah. But because Bill did it and he drafted the guy, people are like, oh, look at him pumping his own tires. No. I think other people have kind of put eyeballs on the Christian Gonzalez is pretty bleeping good.
Yeah, well, and Belichick didn't draft Ty Law and a lot of the other guys you bring in, Darrelle Revis, right? There's other guys that bring in, they weren't his guys originally. So, but I don't know, you bring up the draft, right? And Cam Ward had some comments this week talking about, I'll just read it, right? Yeah, okay, you're either going to draft me or you're not. If you don't draft me, that's your fault. You've got to remember you're the same team that's got to play me for the rest of my career, and I'll remember that. So, for the college football people that I've talked to certainly believe in Cam Ward more than Shedeur Sanders. But as this time goes, even when you saw Deion Sanders on the microphone and Radio Row sort of talking about his boy. So it's going to be interesting. But I do believe from the Patriots standpoint, I love hearing this noise. I would like one of the top 3 picks to be a quarterback from a Patriots standpoint.
Yeah, from the Patriots pick standpoint, you definitely want a little chaos at the top of the draft. Who is the sort of transcendent player? Is it Carter? Is it Hunter? And that's nice, Cam Ward. Great job by you. Welcome to being Josh Rosen 2.0. Remember when that pouty face did this? He fell to like 9 or 10, and it was all the teams that didn't draft me are going to pay. Yeah, they paid him when he went through as a free agent because he bounced around the league more than a ping pong ball.
That's hilarious. I think Cam Ward's in a different conversation, but gosh, you think back to that quarterback year, I believe it's 2018, right? A lot of good guys didn't really pan out, whereas I think last year's quarterback class with Williams, Daniels, May, et cetera, I think a lot of those are going to pan out. And I do believe we can talk about these all-star games. We've talked a lot about sort of sports even in the NBA going back to old school. But I think as we get in this sort of new era of sports, there's so much evaluation, so much still learning. There's so much more access in terms of film and different things. There's also so much ability for these guys to get better as they go along. I remember hearing Mac Jones is working with a quarterback guru. I wait till you see year 2. Not so much. So I think there's a lot of potential for these guys to continue to grow from where they are right now.
Matt Patricia. That's what made me think of when Mac. Oh, by the way, congratulations to Matt. He's now going to be, he'll now be doing promos for a sub shop out in Columbus, Ohio. There is the defensive coordinator. I mean, come on, you can see that. Hey, everybody, I'm defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. Head on down to the Pick and Save. 2 sandwiches for $5 today. It's a pretty good deal. Anyway, and 4A would always get all over me. Oh, Matt's a nice guy. Don't be making fun of him. I want to know your interest in a couple of guys existing on this Patriots roster. What is your interest in bringing back Jonathan Jones as a third corner for the Patriots this year?
I kind of like that one. I don't know how many other ones I'm going to like. So he signed a 2-year, $19 million contract with the Patriots, which included a $7.5 million signing bonus. $13 million guaranteed, average annual value just under 10. I mean, I like the player a lot. So for me, that would be someone who I would probably want to keep in the fold. What do you think?
Me too, definitely. I would play him less. I would use him more in the slot. I think if you knock down that play time, you can still get some good production out of him. And you need somebody on the back end of that secondary who, little veteran, as it gets to Gonzo, another veteran that people will listen to. Jacoby Brissett, or the thought of backup quarterback, because I know neither you or I probably love Jacoby Brissett, but how should they handle the situation at backup?
It's fascinating because a year ago I would have said, what a perfect guy to bring in here, Jacoby Brissett. But because they didn't use him properly in week 18 and have him play that game and lose that game so they could choose any player available, I'm a little sour. But no, I'd like to see them move in a different direction. Look, you talk about Milton, Joe Milton. I know we may get... Whether they trade him or not, I'm fine with him being the backup this season. I really am, even in that small sample size. Yeah, you can go, okay, go get Andy Dalton or whoever it is. I don't mind it. The backup quarterback situation, to me, I can't believe I'm saying it, I feel totally different than I did a year ago. Anybody but Jacoby Brissett. I don't even think he wants to be in the game sometimes when I see him. And he was really bad when he was out there. So, look, this season is not going to go anywhere if Drake May isn't doing his thing. But for me, I'd like it to be really anybody but Jacoby Brissett.
Well, it's interesting, but are you soured on the thought of the veteran backup?
No.
Because to me, that if there's a must, I mean, clearly wide receiver, you need to tackle, One of the must list has to be, let's find the right backup to pair with this kid. Now, the reason I say that is I worked with a backup quarterback, and this is a little bit of the whole, what really does it go into? Because people think, well, if our starter goes down, it's a guy that we can win with. Oh, no. The role of the backup is that a tiny bit. The role of the backup is to be the sounding board, allow the quarterback to know that he can vent to you and you don't have to worry about anything. The guy who can lead you through wow, Josh McDaniels really riding my ass today. Well, say Jimmy Garoppolo's the backup because Josh knows him. Hey, I went through that as a rookie and dealing with Josh as well, The role of the backup quarterback is almost more like a caddy in golf in some ways than it is being the next in line guy, and or as if you're sitting there rooting for someone to go get hurt. So I do think you have to be specific in what you're looking for and who you want to match for a couple of years with Drake May, if May ain't going anywhere.
I agree. And even if a guy like Brian Hoyer is retired, because you don't really, if he gets in the game, the season's over anyway. So I wouldn't be opposed. I think Andy Dalton, I don't know how much Andy Dalton has left, but I don't know. I didn't get the sense from Jacoby Brissett that there was a great connection with Drake May. And maybe I'm missing something there, but maybe it's the way the organization set it up. But I think your points are very well taken. But I would really like them to see a guy, even the way like Josh McCown did down the stretch of his career, where you're really sort of being there for that guy. So, your point's very well taken. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo, I would love that.
Well, I think Garoppolo would be interesting. Coming off injury, again, the familiarity. That's what I think McDaniels
and no one's getting Jimmy G to be their starter.
Correct. You wouldn't think so. If so, then, maybe your original plan went sideways. Only other guy I want to mention to you on this sign away bye-bye list, Dietrich Wise. Is it just time for him to go?
Yeah. Not that expensive. Not that effective. We move on.
Austin Hooper. I'm out on him.
Yeah. When you talk about Juwan Johnson, get me excited. Yeah. I mean, none of these guys. Yeah, I agree.
Alex Austin will be back. I would say Dan Ekwale might be back too, because just a fat body in the middle. I don't want to sound disrespectful, but that's really what it is. I mean, you're just signing beef to be able to throw in the middle of the field. I do think the roster building for teams will be very much tied into what's going to happen to some of the guys at the top. And you and I spent some time talking about T. Higgins today. I do think there will be a domino effect once we kind of find out whether Cincinnati is going to let him go to market. Could they franchise tag him? Could they end up trying to pull something else? I don't know. If T. Higgins were available for trade and it took the second round pick, would you do it to trade the currency and then turn around and pay T. Higgins likely $150 million?
I would, and don't get it twisted. Maybe I sound like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth with T. Higgins. I would absolutely love him walking through that door to be with Drake May for the next decade. You could sign me up for that all day long. It's just hard for me to think of that as a true realistic possibility. So I'm more focused, and because I don't believe them to be a contender next season necessarily, right? So I'm looking a little bit more into the future. But I think this draft is going to dictate a lot with this team. I'm curious to see what they do before the draft versus after the draft, because I think the player they get at 4 has to be a big part of what they do next season. And hopefully if they're going to make some big jump, that player I think is going to make an impact right away. Not unlike you saw in the Philadelphia Eagles with a couple defensive guys make impacts right away in their rookie season. So for me, I think that some of what they do in free agency, I think the top of this draft, you might not know where people are going until draft night potentially. And I think there could be a lot of movement there. So I'm not going to be surprised if the Patriots lay back in the cut a little bit until the draft gets a little bit closer, because I think there's so many variables.
I will say this I'm almost like preparing myself, Jay, for as much as you and I have talked about Travis Hunter and the dream of him now falling to number 4 versus maybe being able to take him number 1. I just feel like he ain't going to get to number 4. Like with the way the betting market is reacting to Shadir Sanders, aren't they almost now telling us that it's Cam Ward and then we don't know whether it's going to be like Jackson Dart or Shadir or whomever, but we kind of know who the number 2 quarterback is going to be, but how interested will teams be to go get that player when you compare him to the rest of the field? Like in all honesty, Vegas is sitting there at 6. I kind of think Shadir Sanders might be there at number 6 for them, because number 4, I don't know. I mean, that's where the Patriots have got to start working the phones a little bit and laying some groundwork for the player who would be there at 4 that would be unexpected, but that they wouldn't draft, so that you can get somebody to come up, slide down, get your offensive lineman. And one other thing about free agency is, I know I'm rambling here.
No, that was a great point. Keep going.
Expect the Patriots to be smart about building this roster, in that when last year they went in saying, oh, the number 3 pick is going to be the quarterback, this pick will go here. I think they're going to do a better job of building what would be a fieldable roster and then bringing in the young guys. If you remember the way Bill Belichick did it, when they would go into the draft, you would all but certainly be able to look at the roster and say, well, if they had to play with these guys right now, they could at least field a team and be okay. Then you add the young guys and you upgrade the talent. I think that's where New England's going to go. Their spend is going to be, we'll get a left tackle, we'll get a wide receiver, and maybe a depth running back. But I think they're going to dive in on some defense and maybe overpay for some guys that we might not like. But they're going to try, I think, Jay, to have as close to a 53-man going into the draft as they've had in the last couple of years.
You know, it's so interesting to think about what everything will look like when they appear on the clock, right? Yeah. You know, and because there's so many different things that can happen in that top 3. And, you know, there were times during the Super Bowl week where I woke up in the morning, I said, I love the Eagles today, right? And then I had picked the Chiefs, right? And I think sometimes it can be a day-to-day thing. So I'm really, and I've talked a lot about the quarterbacks at the top of this draft, and even Jackson Dart to interject a third name.
Oh, that guy.
But it all comes down to how much you like the player, right? We've talked about Bo Nix. How much did they like him? Would they have been willing to go up? And so I think for the Patriots, I think it is super, super important for them to evaluate which players they would be thrilled if they're still on the board for them and their organization at 4. Because as of February 18th, it's hard for me not to think that the most value in the number 4th pick is going to be in moving it. If Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter is there, okay. But for a team that has a gigantic list of needs, I'm not going to be upset. I don't trust Elliott Wolf, but I'm not going to be upset if they move out of that slot, move down a little bit, and increase their draft capital.
Yeah, I kind of like I
want to agree, but
no, I'm groaning. No. It's not the it's not your point. It's the thought of the value at 4 is sliding down. That's what it is. It's not that you presented it. It's more of kind of what it represents. We allowed ourselves to think about the number 1 pick. We allowed ourselves to think about Travis Hunter. And then, okay, number 4 pick, you might need a tackle, this, that, or there. And then you just kind of slide back a little bit. It's a prudent thing to do. Probably what Belichick would do, maybe about 3 times over in the first round. But I'm with you. I hate to say it. I agree with you. But I do kind of feel like the value in the number 4 pick, it's sort of building towards being traded. unless something crazy happens.
And look, if Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter are the top 3 players on the board, I just think for the Patriots to sit there at 4, someone's going to love Jackson Dart. Someone may want to come up and get him, and someone is going to want to go get Deion Sanders Jr. to come lead their organization and put butts in the seats, whoever it may be. I just think there's going to be an opportunity there. And gosh, man, I think, and that's why I asked you last week where Vrabel stands in the decision making, right? Like, what is his knowledge base of all this stuff? Because I don't try. It comes back to Elliott Wolf for me, and so I don't trust the guy making the decision.
Yeah, I think Braves is going to be listened to, and if he isn't, he'll figure out a way to be heard. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Hey, I just popped up this ESPN.com 50 free agent list.
Mm-hmm.
They have T. Higgins as the number 1 wide receiver. But what's really interesting is some of the team fits that they give, right? So in this column, it says T. Higgins' best team fit, the Washington Commanders. That feels like out of nowhere, given that they have McLaurin, and last year wide receiver wasn't a real issue for them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Dodson's moved on. They have, I do think, look, you put T. Higgins on the other side of McLaurin, look out. But I think T. Higgins playing in a Cincinnati Bengals uniform at least next year. So I think while he is a sexy free agent, it's hard for me to go down that road. But yeah, I think, look, a team that just made it to the Final Four last year, add a piece like that, sure, it looks good on paper.
So I'm also, as I scroll down a little bit, I was surprised to see this one. The number 4 ranked free agent on this ESPN list is DJ Reed, the corner from the Jets. Best team fit, New England Patriots. I didn't think a high-end corner would be on the list.
Well, and I do think the Patriots, thank goodness Drake May was able to play a little bit last year and showcase, because I do think it is a sneaky hot destination, right? Would you rather go to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence and the new coach down there, Liam Cohen, or would you rather maybe come to New England, right? Whereas a year ago, Jacksonville might have been a hot destination. So I think that's going to be for the key for the Patriots is which free agents actually want to come here, right? And a guy like Kendrick Bourne, who we may think is expendable, I hope he stays in the fold, because I do believe he's a big sort of piece of the energy and the sort of clubhouse that exists there. So, but yeah, I mean, I love that potential move there. And I do think there are going to be some other free agents that want to come to Boston, which I love.
Well, here's another one. They got Milton Williams, the defensive tackle from Philadelphia, the eighth ranked player in free agency, best team fit, Patriots.
I love it. A little undersized, I believe, but I also think underrated with a lot of those names that got a lot of shine on that Philadelphia defense. I always worry about a player coming from a unit that's so good. Yeah. Curious how his individual play is. But the more important thing to me is that they're going to have chances to have conversations with these guys with Mike Vrabel in the room instead of Gerard Mayo, who may be a nice guy, but is not going to move the needle.
100%. 100%. And some people called it, but I'll leave it at that. Hey, the number 40 player on the ESPN list, Alaric Jackson. And it says in here, we already matched a few players to New England, but with the Patriots having the most cap space, they can continue to spend by adding Jackson to play left tackle. 6'7", 345, 35 career starts. That would be a very interesting way of handling it. Jackson played for the Rams. I would say if they do that, that means they're still going to take a tackle high. So you sort of have the guy that can fill in. That's sort of the depth piece that I talked about of the, you can field a roster. Now go get the young guys in the draft that elevate your overall talent pool.
But wouldn't you rather them make the free agent acquisition than pick a tackle 4th overall?
I would. I almost kind of want him to do both, to be quite honest with you, because in reality, if David Andrews stays healthy, I know on when who can play guard. If I sign one and draft one and have Caden Wallace, now I've got the appropriate level of depth there, where the only thing I'm really worried about is left guard long-term. And I got 8 guys that I think I can win.
Right. And some guys to lead them, and Doug Marrone and Dante Scarnecchia.
Well, that's the other thing too, is that, Doug Marrone being around now, the Scarnecchia thing will get played up a lot because, how can you not love the guy? But I do think there will be a big Doug Marrone imprint. Hey, I only want to do this for a chuckle. So my alma mater, University of Rhode Island,
Yeah.
played their first baseball game of the year. Okay. And I don't know if you saw these, Jay, but the first weekend college baseball scores were wild. URI beat a team in baseball 36-22.
Bro,
That sounds like that score should be what happens in November in Williamsburg playing a football game.
and if anyone saw your Instagram story, it looked like a bunch of football scores. It wasn't just this game. There were a lot, but 36-20, 48, 58 runs in a baseball game. It's insane.
How long did that take to play? Like, seriously, that's the first thing I thought of, that if I were like, Bill Koch from the Providence Journal or something like that, and he had to go on the road and cover that thing, like, my God, that must have been a 7-hour baseball game.
Well, dude, and if you look at the box, right? All right, Rams, you're down 14-6, at halftime after the first and second inning, right? Put up 17 in the top of the fifth. Just unbelievable. And I bet in the bottom of the seventh, William and Mary thought they had a shot.
I'm sure they did. I mean, 17 in an inning. Good Lord. Like, what do you do at that point? There's it's like a little league game where it's like the coach has no one to go to, and you're just like, all right, forfeit the hell out of this thing. I don't know why that tickled me, but it got all over me. 36-22 for a baseball score. Imagine. Hey, but seriously though, imagine if something like that happened in a big league game. Like, we've seen scores get tilted like 24-1, but would you literally sit through a 7-hour Major League Baseball game if you knew it was going to end up 25-24 and your team won?
Well, that actually does appeal to me because I'm an offensive guy. Imagine the umpires in these games. Like, you got to be kidding me. It's like I just start calling strikes if it was anywhere close.
What Harry Doyle's doing in the game, just outside.
Exactly.
You ring them up.
Shout out the late great Bob Uecker.
Yes, that is. Oh my God. And Major League, it was on over the weekend. I can't not put it on in the background.
I agree.
For you youngs who have not seen Major League, you need to see it. It is that, and the program might be two of the best sports movies ever made.
I don't know when Major League came out, right? I don't know the year, but I'm curious because I feel as though that was one of those first sort of R-rated movies that
89.
89. Okay, yeah. So I was 10, 11 years old. So maybe that was, about that time. Yeah, my daughter's 11. We're not watching R-rated. Yeah, so that probably was one of those first R-rated movies for me, and it felt like it. So I got a big soft spot for that.
Did anybody come along when they did the whole when we win, we peel a section? And someone come by and no, you can't see that now.
I think that's why I liked the movie early on, right? I thought she was super attractive.
Oh, very much so. And what a great thing too. I mean, imagine the outrage in our country right now if a baseball team tried to do that with their, youthful owner. When Jordan Hudson takes over Team Belichick and they, and they do that kind of stuff, then we know. Great job by Cody Merrill. Make sure you're following us on all the social media channels. Jason is everywhere at Austin Anik. And you never know whether those Anik boys are going to pop up next. So make sure you're keeping an eye on Jay. You can get me at The Real Gresh everywhere. My Sunday marathon, I'm just kind of let it fly under the radar. And then we'll see how it goes when we recap here on Tuesday for another edition of Gas.